Story 1. I was sitting in a dark room with a single light above my head, kind of like a spotlight shining down, waiting for something to happen, and an anxious feeling of dread. I only felt it when I tried to move outside the twister into the dark. It was almost as if the dark was alive. Have you ever had the feeling someone or something is watching you late at night while you are alone? That's the feeling I had. I traveled for a while in the darkness. Occasionally I would see light spots, as if a single beam of light had been pointed at the ground. After a while, I saw myself heading towards one of those lit spots. As I approached, I could see people milling around in the light. Some were standing in the lighted area, and others just between the light rim and the dark. As I moved closer, I could see children about my age playing with a whole bunch of puppies. I wasn't able to get down to play with the children because the twister kind of held me like a mother cradling a baby. However, I could lean out of the twister to touch the kids and puppies. In fact, one little girl held a puppy up to me and said, "Hi, here, you have one." At once, the twister began to move away from the light and the kids with the puppies. I reached out to grab a puppy, but I was moving too fast. The light began to fade until there was only the dark nothingness. That is when I woke up. I was lying on my back looking up at a bright light when the image of a nurse and a doctor came into focus. They were saying something to me, but I couldn't hear very well. My body was itchy from the allergic reaction and it ached all over. I can't remember how I got home that night or how long I was sick because of the incident. I overheard people saying how lucky I was to have survived the wasp bite and that I had died several times. Apparently, I died a couple of times on my way to the hospital and a couple of times while I was there. A short time after is when things began to happen around our house. Strange things like voices, smells, and bumps in the night. In the morning, we would find chairs moved around, cupboard doors open, and the contents thrown on the floor. The cats would walk around with the hair on their backs standing up. Sometimes they would run through the house as if someone were chasing them, their tails poofed out, wide-eyed and wired. As time went by, people would come to visit, but soon after they arrived, they would make excuses as to why they had to leave so abruptly. Foul odors would waft through the house, causing my parents to scoot around opening doors and windows to chase out the stench. Even in the dead of winter, many people, including family members, believed that something happened to open a corridor between the living world and the afterlife, or wherever I went the night I died. My mom and dad did say they couldn't remember any of these occurrences happening prior to my incident. The house I grew up in was my grandmother's before it became ours. Our family lived in this house for over 100 years. I would have thought in all that time there would have been at least one reported paranormal event. Wouldn't you? This story was shared by Ray F. and happened in 1958. Story 2. After almost 2 weeks sick, I began feeling dangerously ill and knew that I needed to do something. I decided to make a medicinal tea out of desert marigold that I had collected and cured earlier in the spring. In my condition, I failed to notice that this herb had not cured properly and was completely covered with mold. As soon as I drank the tea, my entire body went into panic mode. I heard a roaring sound like a train inside my head as my body convulsed, and I passed out on my bed. My last thought was wondering if I was dying, but then I woke up to a heightened state of awareness without my physical body. I realized that I must have died, and it felt unbelievably good. With me was a spirit being who guided me through the process of reviewing everything that had happened in my life, from very early childhood right up to that present moment. It seemed that my life memories formed a circle around me, like being inside a panorama. I relived my entire life, even long forgotten and seemingly insignificant memories. But now, with help from the spirit being, I had a sense of the larger picture that enabled me to see how my actions affected others and why certain things happened to me. There was no sadness or regret. Rather, everything seemed absolutely perfect, just the way it all needed to be. I understood that things happen for reasons we seldom know at the time, and that our choices in even little everyday situations may be important. I also understood that it was not my time to die now, because I had much yet to learn and experience. Actually, what the spirit being said to me was, "You haven't really learned anything yet." This was intended with humor in order to emphasize the point. Then, I lost consciousness again. I awakened with a jolt and with the knowing that I was healed. I was still quite weak, but my whole body told me I was no longer ill. I looked at the clock and saw that it was 9:30 at night. I figured I had been unconscious for a few hours because I drank the tea mid-afternoon. Later, I would learn that it was actually the night of the next day. I had been unconscious for 30 hours. I don't know if this was a spiritual healing or if I may have synchronistically treated myself. The mold in my desert tea could have been the perfect antibiotic for my valley fever. Either way seems equally meaningful to me. Every day of my life since then has been different. Now, in addition to my ever-present array of flaws, I live with a deeper appreciation of the gift of human life. I am more aware of and more thankful for the moments of each day. I view others, including non-human beings, with more respect and awe. I am more conscientious about my interactions with others. I find more humor in life, and I live without fear of my own death. I should mention that this near-death experience happened in 1980, before I had ever read anyone else's account of a near-death experience. Also, the next day I drove to a medical clinic in Casa Grande, Arizona, because I was curious what illness could cause an experience like this. They ran tests, and a few days later the test results were in. I returned for a consultation with a doctor who looked puzzled at me and said, "Are you sure you didn't receive any treatment? You've had a severe case of valley fever, and that could have been fatal without treatment." This story was shared by Gary S. and happened in 1980. Story 3. After 2 days in the hospital, nothing could be found wrong with my heart. To be sure all was well, my doctor and I decided that we would do a heart catheterization. During the procedure, the dye that was injected did not go where it was supposed to due to an extra artery that I have. The doctor then injected another dose of dye into my heart. At that time, my heart began to quiver. The nurses and doctor yelled at me, telling me to cough. I tried to cough, but then passed out. Immediately, I came to be in a large open space. The ground was like a pure bluish-colored jewel or glass. The air was filled with a sort of bluish, swirling fog or haze. I saw figures form and then dissipate within the fog. There was a horizon very far away, but in this horizon was a brilliant, pure light. It was as bright as a star, but did not hurt my eyes. I knew that this light was God and Jesus, and could feel the Holy Spirit flowing through everything. I was escorted by a large being. I felt like this being was very powerful, but it did not scare me. When we moved, we seemed to glide from place to place, and the being did not turn as we moved, but always faced me. It did not have a face, but like the souls in the fog was just there, like a silhouette. It showed me the throne of God, and then it showed me 2 tall pillars. The pillars seemed to be made of stone, and they rose up forever. There was what seemed to be vines or writing on the pillars. Beyond the pillars was a walkway that resembled a low bridge. I do not recall where this bridge went to. While we were moving, souls would come up to me. The only 2 that I remember were my grandparents who had died some years before. I remember the feeling from them was reassurance that everything was okay. During my time there, it felt as if I were there for hours. Although I was clinically dead for 5 minutes, I felt a great sense of peace and love. I could tell that this feeling flowed from the bright light, which is God, Jesus. I could also see the Holy Spirit flowing through everything in the form of golden rays. Everything else was a shade of blue. The only color was the bright light that was God, and the rays from Him that was the Holy Spirit. After what seemed like hours, I was told that I had to go back. I said that I wanted to stay, but the large being lifted what would have been hands and pushed me back to this world. The whole time I was there, this being was talking to me. I received knowledge and instructions, but I cannot remember exactly what. I failed to mention that no audible sounds or words were spoken. Everything was conveyed as feelings. I could feel everyone's thoughts all at once, as if I was plugged into some heavenly network. It was amazing. This story was shared by Richard E. and happened in 2020.